G'day guys and gal. Fulgrim isn't exactly everyone's favourite Primarch. His fall to chaos was frustrating, and he is flamboyantly obnoxious now that he is a phallic demon snake. However, maybe he can be redeemed. Fabius Bile created a perfect clone of the Primarch Fulgrim, a loyalist clone, free of chaotic taint, and that is something worth talking about. Before we get started, the war against Chapter Master Valrak rages on. Not really sure why I called it a war, me and Valrak are good friends, but he must die. So we must overtake him in subscribers. I didn't want to have to do it, but I have to unleash a secret weapon. I spent $100 commissioning Chapter Master Valrak hentai, which can be viewed on my Patreon for people donating $1 per month or more. I am not joking. When we overtake Valrak in subscribers, I'll make that hentai visible to everyone, even non-patrons, to celebrate a victory over a mighty foe. Once again, not really sure why I'm pitching this as a conflict. We are actually really supportive of each other, but I just can't help myself. So yeah, do the right thing. Click subscribe so everyone can witness Valrak ploughing a gender-bent Valrak. Today we'll talk about who Clone Grim is and how he was made. We will also discuss the implications of his existence as well as why he was considered perfect as opposed to the other Primarch clones Fabius had made. To finish, we'll then talk about what he's currently up to and what I hope to see from him in the future. Let's get into it. When Fulgrim fell to chaos, he fell really hard. Out of all the Primarchs, his fall was probably the most unfortunate because it was the most forced. See, when he invaded a planet full of serpentine hentai worshipping Slaaneshi sluts and killed them all, he ended up in one of their temples. The temple had an evil, glowing purple dildo looking sword in it, and Fulgrim was like, "Hehe boy," and drew the sword. If he had not drawn that sword, he would have remained one of the most loyal Primarchs there was. The sword infected his body, then his mind, and finally his spirit, causing him to become a chaos-loving wacko. Sure, Fulgrim had a fat ego and wasn't afraid to show it, however most of the Primarchs did, and there were multiple times when even with the corruption of the sword, he still nearly broke free of its influence and killed Horus when he found out he was a traitor. The point I'm trying to make here is that Fulgrim was never supposed to fall. Hence, when Fabius Bile, an Emperor's Children arsehole scientist who turns out to still actually play outside the clutches of chaos, despite somehow being a massive pain in the ass, created a perfect clone of Fulgrim. It appeared to be uncorrupted and untainted, with all the Primarch mojo intact. See, Fabius' previous attempts at cloning Primarchs had kinda sucked. He originally cloned the dead Ferris for Fulgrim, who tried to turn him to chaos but failed and killed the Ferris clone every time. This Ferris clone was unstable and incomplete. Bile then tried to clone Horus after he got clapped by the Big E, however that clone got killed by Abaddon. You know, the dude who failed all those Black Crusades and lost a melee fight to an old as tits Eldar wizard? So clearly, that clone sucked balls as well. So, if the Ferris and Horus's clones didn't work that well, so how come the Fulgrim's clone did? Fabius even admits he has no idea why Clone Grim came out so well, and while it isn't explicitly stated to the audience, I have a pretty solid theory. So, the Primarchs are more than just a body. The Emperor spent a lot of time and potential sacrifice in order to give them such powerful souls. The Primarch's special spirit is why they can pull off so much bullshit. It's why Guilliman was able to will himself to stay alive despite Magnus dropping a building on him, and it's why Angron was able to hold up a Titan's foot despite the science behind it being ridiculous. It's their Primarch mojo. Clone Grim had it, whilst the Ferris clone and Horus clone did not. Fabius doesn't have the knowledge or power to recreate a Primarch soul. Hence, his Horus clone was soulless as the Emperor had destroyed all traces of Horus from real space and the warp. The real Ferris had been killed, hence the Ferris clone was also likely soulless, or if it had a soul, it was likely just a small shard. The Fulgrim clone had a soul, the true Fulgrim soul. See, when someone becomes a demon prince, the chaos gods they choose to suck off takes their soul and replaces the large hole where their soul used to be with lots of warp spaghetti. This binds them to their will and makes them a demon, and this is what happened to the real Fulgrim. However, when Fabius made the Fulgrim clone, there was suddenly a body out there that had a greater claim to Fulgrim's soul than Slaanesh did. Hence the soul left Slaanesh and entered into the new Clone Grim's body. The soul was never shattered in death like Ferris's, nor was it deleted by a hectic Dragon Ball Z finisher move like Horus's was. It was intact. Now, that is just my headcanon, and the novel where Clone Grim features is from the perspective of Fabius, who isn't exactly a reliable narrator, and it doesn't explicitly state the reason behind Fulgrim not sucking so much. That's the canon I go with until I'm presented with something more concrete. Clone Grim's journey begins when he and thousands of others are cloned in a city that Fabius was in. Fabius cloned numerous other Primarchs and more or less wanted to be like the Emperor. Abaddon, not keen on having his leadership challenged by an additional 20 Primarchs, all without their chaos corruption, destroyed the city and killed most of the clones, who were infants at the time. The baby Fulgrim was protected by surviving mutants on the planet, as it was common with baby Primarchs being protected by whatever finds them, and eventually Fabius returns and retrieves the child. He waits every day for the baby to die over failed cloning, for chaos to infest it, or for it to just kind of suck, but that day never comes. The baby grows rapidly into a perfect Primarch, a Primarch loyal to Fabius as he sees him as his daddy. Now the Fulgrim clone was able to keep a lot of its memories from the real Fulgrim due to some random bullshit science stuff, so he was aware of what he became, and he was aware that Fabius wasn't the Emperor. However, he still owed Fabius a great debt for raising him. I'm not sure if all the Primarch clones would have been loyal to Fabius. Fulgrim was known for his ass kissing and his daddy issues. However, despite being incorrupted and knowing about the Imperium, he helped Fabius do some pretty questionable shit out of loyalty. Although Clone Grim grows into a powerful Primarch body, he's still only a couple years old and acts a lot like a child and is treated as such by Fabius, who often sends him to his room or grounds him. Clone Grim in turn saves Fabius on multiple occasions. Overall, a pretty good father-son relo brewing here. However, as Clone Grim grows and matures into his true Primarch form, he becomes more assertive. He's still loyal to Fabius, but he just isn't a minion of his. Fabius has a collection of superhumans he has been experimenting on to try and create a new generation of Space Marines, like Call's Primaris but way less clean. They were warriors, but Fabius didn't see them like that. He really treasured them and was protective of them. These new men, as they were called, slowly started to shift their loyalty to Fulgrim. He was a Primarch, whereas Fabius was this old, bold wacko. In fairness, the loyalty shift probably wasn't that dramatic or noticeable, but this is coming from the perspective of Fabius, who was a little bit paranoid. Eventually, Clone Grim rallies the new men and other superhumans to him to attack some Emperor's children who are being assholes to Fabius. They have a pretty intense fight, and one of the new men, who happens to be a chick, progressive Fabius, steps in front of Clone Grim to block a bolter shot at him. Then Fabius and Trazin, or Trance or however you say it, the Infinite, everyone's favourite Necron, teleports into the battle and it pauses. Fabius is furious that Clone Grim took command of his creations and led them into a fight, whilst the Emperor's children decide that Clone Grim is actually a pretty swell guy and they kneel before him. Fabius is furious that his female Space Marine got shot, despite surviving, and Fulgrim doesn't really know why he's so mad, as warriors get wounds all the time. Fabius then realises he can't control a Primarch, that eventually Clone Grim would take control of everything he'd created, and he would end up being subservient to him. Already, the urge to drop his new men project and become Clone Grim's bitch was strong, hence he told Trazin he could take Clone Grim and put him in his collection. No one was really happy about that, especially not Fabius, but he saw it as necessary. Fabius then tried to justify it by saying that Clone Grim and his ego would have led down the same path to chaos, and that he had to stop it. This is obviously bullshit, and just Fabius trying to justify him doing the wrong thing. Clone Grim is remarked as saying he will set everything right that Fulgrim messed up. He had all of the traitor Fulgrim's memories and was disgusted by them. There was no Layer Blade or anything like it, so this Fulgrim would have remained loyal. Unfortunately, Clone Grim is still in the possession of Trazin, and is not known if we will see him again. After all, he could have just been a plot device for moving Fabius forward in his character arc, but I would say this isn't the last we see of him. The implications of him returning to the setting outside of Fabius's little adventures would be massive. He wouldn't have a legion under his command, and it's likely Guilliman would reject him regardless, so I think he would act as this renegade Primarch, fighting against chaos and his former self, but not as a servant of the Imperium. Some kind of showdown between Clone Grim and Demon Fulgrim would be amazing to see. There is room for traitor Primarchs to be redeemed in some form. Currently there's only one active Loyalist Primarch, with the majority of traitor Primarchs still being around, so if one became Loyalist, in Fulgrim's sake by Clone Grim killing Demon Grim, then it wouldn't represent a massive shift in power or anything. Hopefully Lucius dies as well. To be honest, the entire Emperor's Children Legion needs to get Control-Alt-Deleted and then rebuilt under Clone Grim. And that does us for today guys, the uncorrupted perfect clone of Fulgrim, who he was and why he was perfect. If you enjoyed the video, want to support the channel, then Patreon is the place to be. As I've said, the Valrak hentai will be posted there for patrons first, and then once we overtake the big man, it will become publicly available to everyone. Hit the subscribe button, then hit the real subscribe button for more perfectly cloned content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.